The rain had been falling for 2 days when Delia Marsh stopped trying to whistle a deaf dog off a flooded footbridge and waded in after him. The old lockkeeper's house on the Wicket Canal had not passed a boat since 1959, and the stone footbridge beside it arched over a spillway nobody had cleared in a generation, and out in the middle of it, on the last dry course of stone, a 9-year-old German shepherd with a black saddle and a grey face stood with his front paws set wide, staring down into the roaring water at a spot in the bank, exactly where he had stood at first light the morning before, and the 11 mornings before that. Ranger could not hear the water. He had gone deaf the winter he turned 7, and he still knew a wrong sound the way an old carpenter knows a wall is not plumb, by the weight of the air and the tremble in the ground, and he had felt something in that bank that no living person in the valley believed was there. Delia did not know it yet, but the stone he was guarding had been mortared into place in the spring of 1936 by a man the county had spent 89 years calling a crank, and in time 5 people who had laughed at the two of them would take the laughter back one at a time, and a 6th apology would come almost 90 years too late. 9 weeks before that 12th morning, Delia had carried a cardboard box out of the county road and bridge office in Holland, Ohio, with 11 years of service behind her and a reduction in force letter paper clipped to her final check. She was the culvert inspector, the one who drove the back roads after every storm and logged which pipes were plugged and which shoulders were washing. And when the county merged 3 departments, the new director decided software could flag a bad culvert as well as a woman in a truck. A man she had never met read her the decision from a printed page and thanked her for her dedication to public safety twice. 11 years of pre-dawn call-outs and mud to the knee had left her $9,000 and a truck that was hers now that the county plates were gone, and on the drive home she passed the fairgrounds and saw the banner for the delinquent property auction, and she pulled in mostly because home meant a quiet kitchen and a phone that would not ring. Parcel 19 came up after lunch. Former Canal lockkeeper's residence and lock number 4. Wicket Canal. A stone cottage and a stone footbridge and 1.6 acres of towpath, taxes unpaid since the last owner died. Sold as is, where is, all contents. The auctioneer read that last line the way a man reads the fine print he has never once had to honour. Boyd Kessler bid on it to strip the cut stone. Boyd ran the reclamation yard on the Holland Road and had a laugh you could hear over an auctioneer, and he wanted the cottage for its foundation blocks. Delia raised her card at $3,200. She could not have told a judge why. 11 years she had been the one who read water for a living, who stood in a ditch at 4 a.m. and told a county what the storm was doing, and here was a house built to do exactly that, going for the price of a used truck. Boyd pushed her to $5,000, turning to find her face between bids. She took it at $5,100. In the gravel afterward, he caught up with her, still grinning, and said, "You know what you just bought, honey. A wet basement and a bridge to nowhere. Come spring, you'll pay me to knock it down, and I'd have done it for free today." 2 men by the hog pens laughed, and one of them told it at the co-op, and by Sunday it had reached her sister. Carol had taken Delia in at 13 and had earned her opinions and served them with the pot roast. "You have no job," she said. "You spent your savings on a ruin, on a dead canal. It is a bridge to nowhere with a swamp under it, and the water is rising, and you will be down there by yourself." "Not by myself," Delia said. Carol set down the gravy and looked at her. "A deaf old guard dog who cannot hear you call him," she said, "is not company. That is one more thing to bury." She meant it gently, which was the worst way she could have meant it. The dog had come to Delia the same month as the layoff. The Pruitt place east of Holland had gone to the bank in August, and old Emmett Pruitt stood in his sold yard at 83, moving to his son's apartment in Columbus, holding a lead he had no place to take. Delia had baled hay on that farm every summer from 15 to 20. She had known Ranger as the pup who herded the barn cats for practice, then as the best stock dog on that stretch of the river, and then as the veteran who lost his hearing to an ear infection nobody caught in time and kept working anyway, reading the herd off the dust and the ground. The bank wanted the land clean. The son's apartment did not take dogs. So the old man put the lead in Delia's hand, and the only thing he told her came out sounding like a caution. "He does not quit a post," Emmett said. "Don't you dare teach him to." Delia and Ranger moved on to the canal the first week of September, which meant she parked her truck and a borrowed camper on the old towpath and started hauling out what 60 years of damp had left in the cottage. Mud daubers by the peck, a collapsed rope bed, and a stove worth saving. 9 window sashes rotted to lace, and set into the thick back wall that faced the spillway, a course of squared stones so tight and so level that they did not match the rougher masonry around them, laid by a hand that had cared more than the job required. She scrubbed and reglazed and chinked while September ran out, and the two of them slept in the camper on the bank. Then, on a grey morning in the middle of October, in the wet dark before the sun, Ranger scratched at the camper door, and Delia, half asleep, let him out. When she looked 10 minutes later, he was not in the weeds. He was out on the footbridge, dead centre, front paws braced on the last dry course above the spillway, his whole body aimed down at one spot in the stone bank, tail low and still, not hunting. Holding the posture she had watched for 5 summers on the Pruitt place, the stance that had pinned 40 steers to a fence, the whole animal drawn down to one point. She called him, and he did not turn, because he could not hear her, and it took her a moment every morning to remember that, and it broke something in her every morning to remember it. He stayed while the sky lightened. He stayed through the rattled feed he could feel, but not hear, and the flashlight waved in his good eye, and, in the end, Delia walking out onto the slick stone in her socks to haul him back by the collar, at which point Ranger simply lay down on the bridge, all 71 pounds of him, and became part of the masonry. When the sun finally cleared the sycamores and touched the water, he got up on his own, shook once head to tail, and walked back to the bank ahead of her, stiff and unhurried and thoroughly pleased with himself. The next morning, it happened again. Same spot, same hour, same silence. And the morning after that. October ate money faster than it ate daylight. Window glass ran $21 a sheet, and she needed 9. Mortar, roofing felt, a chimney liner, propane, and diesel for a truck that did nothing now but haul water and gravel. She was carrying drinking water in from town in 7-gallon jugs because the cottage well came up the colour of tea. By the 1st of November, the $9,000 was down to $2,600, and Delia had taken 3 shifts a week at the Holland Feed and Hardware to slow the bleeding, which put her in front of the whole county often enough for the county to enjoy itself. Boyd Kessler came through most Saturdays and never let it pass. "How's the yacht club?" he would say, loud enough for the checkout line. "Dog find you any more waterfront." One Saturday, a tall old man in a canvas barn coat paid for his fence staples, waited out Boyd, and said, quietly, that he did not see the wisdom in it either. Warren Tolliver had sat on the county commission for 18 years before he stepped down, and his word in that valley carried the sort of weight that does not need to be loud. "They closed that canal for cause, young lady," he said. "It flooded low ground for 100 years, and the smartest thing this county ever did was let it go back to swamp. It was not unkind. It was worse than unkind. It was sensible. and the checkout line nodded along with it. Meanwhile, the dog kept his appointments. Every morning, between first grey and full sun, Ranger walked out onto the footbridge and held his point on the same 3 feet of stone bank, and every morning Delia stood at the end of the bridge with her coffee going cold, counting. Morning 6. Morning 8. Morning 11, the one after 2 days of rain, when she waded out through the spillway race to drag him in and ended up crouched beside him instead, both of them soaked, and felt, or thought she felt, a faint cold seep of water coming out of the bank that was clearer and colder than the brown flood tearing past a foot away. She told herself it was runoff, old banks weep in a wet fall. Everything down there dripped and ran. Still, the vet appointment she had been putting off got made that afternoon, because a deaf old dog who wades onto a flooded bridge alone to guard a wall of stone is a dog somebody ought to look at. Dr. Priya Raman ran the Holland Animal Clinic and did not soften her verdicts. She checked the teeth, the cloudy old eyes, the hips, ran a hand down the spine, listened to the story with her mouth going flat, and gave the diagnosis while Ranger sat on the table with the patience of a bank guard. Deaf dogs get anxious about ground they cannot check by ear, she said. He has lost his hearing and his eyes are going, and a dog like that will fix on a spot and guard it, because guarding is the one job he still trusts himself to do. It is called compulsive fixation, and on a flooding bridge, it is going to get him drowned, keep him off that water, and give him a post at ground level. $90 to hear that her dog was breaking down and her bridge was going to kill him, and the drive home was the longest half hour of that whole grey season. She tried to take the advice exactly once. The next dawn she clipped Ranger to a run line staked by the camper before the sky turned, and went inside and made herself not look, and failed. The dog did not fight the line and did not cry. He walked to the end of it, sat down facing the bridge, and held that position for 3 hours, one front paw lifted off the cold mud, his whole greying face aimed at a course of stone he could not reach, standing his watch at the end of a rope. She came out at 8, unclipped him, and never staked the line again. She told herself she was humouring a confused old dog. What she was actually doing was starting to trust her partner over the diagnosis, because one thing would not lie down. Anxious dogs come apart in the evening, when the light goes and the house fills with shadow. Every article and every forum and Dr. Raymond herself said the fixation worsens at dusk. Ranger had never once held that stone at dusk. At dusk, he was a rug by the stove. Whatever pulled him onto that bridge kept the opposite hours from the disease, and it kept them exactly, and in 11 years of reading water for a county Delia, had learned one law she trusted above all others, that a thing which happens on a schedule has a cause. She started running it like the inspector she still was. What is different about that bank at dawn, and only at dawn? Light, temperature, the level of the canal, the way the ground breathes when the night chill lets go. On a still, cold morning in the second week of November, with frost on the towpath, she went out onto the bridge behind the dog, knelt at the rail above his stone, and watched the bank instead of the water. And she saw it. Where the tight-laid course met the rougher wall, a thin ribbon of clear water threaded out of a joint and ran down the stone, steaming faintly in the cold, separate from the muddy race below, and it was coming out under pressure, a steady weep that did not rise and fall with the flood, but held its own line, hour after hour, as if something behind that wall were feeding it. She fetched a jar and a rag and cleaned the joint and caught a cupful, and it ran clear and cold and tasted of iron and stone. Spring water, not canal water, threading out of a wall that a careful man had built across the mouth of a spring. All night the cold pressed the flow down. When the first sun warmed the face of the bank, the seep quickened for an hour, and carried its cold, clean breath and its iron smell up out of the joint. Every still dawn for 90 years, with nobody standing on the bridge at the right hour to notice. Because nobody crossed that bridge anymore. Nobody who read water for a living, anyway. She got a cold chisel and a lamp and went over the tight course on her knees at the next low light. Every stone in that back wall was set in grey lime mortar, weathered soft, crumbling at a touch. Every stone but one. Behind a skin of moss and silt, the keystone of the tight course was pointed not in lime, but in a hard, dark mortar that turned the chisel, and its face had been scored, long ago and on purpose, with a single shallow line that a passing eye would take for a crack, and that a builder would know for a mark. Lime is how you close a wall. Hard mortar and a scribe line are how you mean to come back. She sat on her heels on the wet bridge with her heart going and did the arithmetic of it, 90 years of a dead canal and one stone in one wall that a man had sealed the careful way and never come back for. Ranger lay down against her leg, chin on the scored stone, and let out a long breath. It was a Wednesday. She decided the stone would come out Saturday, at dawn, in the hour the wall breathed, because the find belonged to the dog, and the dog would be on watch when it opened. If you have ever been the only one who believed an old dog, stay on that bridge with them. And if you want to hear what 90 years of silence sounds like when it finally opens, this is the time to subscribe. Because the stone Delia lifted that Saturday changed 5 lives, and one of them belonged to a man who had been dead since 1951. Saturday came in still and hard, with a skin of ice on the slack water and the spillway race still loud. Delia carried out a lamp, a masonry hammer, 2 chisels, a pry bar, and a thermos, and Ranger walked ahead of her onto the bridge and took his stone, and for once she was on time for the appointment. She worked the hard mortar out of the joints by lamplight while the sky went from ink to slate and the dark stuff came away in chips, not powder, laid by a man who knew that lime would not hold against a spring. 3 sides gave up over an hour. The 4th fought her until the sun broke against the frost and the seep quickened under her hands, and Ranger stood and put his nose to the joint, tail dead still. She set the pry bar and leaned, and the keystone slid out of the wall a grinding inch at a time, and the 90 sealed years came out with it, an air of cold iron and old wax and tallow, and the dog pushed his grey face into the gap before the stone was clear. Behind it, the mouth of the spring had been walled off into a dry stone chamber the size of a bread oven, corbelled and sloped so the water ran under it and never into it, a mason's job, tight and dry as a strongbox. Inside, up on a slate shelf above the trickle, sat a japanned tin trunk gone to rust freckles, and beside it a stoneware crock sealed with wax and a lid of lead. She hauled them out onto the bridge with numb hands, sat back against the rail, and opened another man's whole silence. The trunk held a stack of oilcloth wrapped ledgers, canvas-bound, lettered by year, 1928 through 1936. A folder of onion skin carbons, the ghost copies of typed letters, a tin box of glass plate photographs, dozens, each sleeved in numbered paper. A roll of survey drawings on linen, the ink still black, and laid square on top, a heavy envelope, its face crossed in a firm brown hand, with a line that lifted the hair on Delia's arms in the cold. For whoever the water sends. She read the letter with the dog's chin on her knee. My name is Josiah Wren, it began, and I kept lock number 4 on this canal from 1922 until they closed it, and my dog Captain kept it with me the last 8 of those years. He is under the flat stone on the point, and his collar is in the crock with the rest of what I could not carry down and would not throw in the water. Whoever you are you have found the record of the Millbrook flood, and I will set it down plainly. Because plain is the one way no man in this county would let me say it. In the spring of 1936, I told the Canal Board and the county both that the old feeder dam above Millbrook was failing, that the spring line had shifted and the ground behind it was soft, and I brought them my levels and my logs to prove the pool was climbing when it had no business climbing. The board engineer, a young man from the state with clean boots, told me a lock keeper was not a surveyor and that the dam had stood 80 years and would stand 80 more, and he wrote in his report that the keeper at Lock 4 was, and here is his word, alarmist. On the night of the 4th of April, the feeder dam went out in the dark, and the flood took the low half of Millbrook, the tannery and the grist mill and 19 houses along the run, and it drowned 4 people who might have been walked up the hill if a warning had gone out at supper instead of at midnight. The inquiry wanted to know why the keeper at Lock 4 had not sounded the alarm, and the board's own record, which lived in the board's own office, showed no report from me that spring. I took my logbook to the hearing to show them the readings, and a man in a stiff collar looked at it for less than a minute and told me the official record was complete. They closed my lock the next year and wrote in the file that the keeper was unreliable, and the county has told it that way ever since. Here is the thing they do not know. Every reading I took, I copied into my weekly report to the water district in Holland, level and rainfall together, because the water district filed by the year and read what the board never wanted read, and I put the dam in that report every week from the 1st of March, in plain figures, right beside the rainfall. If you have a fairer year than mine, find the received copy of my March reports to the Holland Water District for 1936. They have said this whole time that the pool behind the feeder dam was rising. The plates in the tin are the dam and the pool and the crack in the face, taken with my own camera the week before it broke. The crock holds Captain's collar, and coin I saved out of 30 years of small wages and never found a use for it a lock nobody used, and I would rather put it in the hand of a stranger than leave it to a county that called me a liar. Watch the dawn for me, whoever you are. The wall breathes at first sun. Captain used to lay his head on the stone, and I never knew what he heard behind it, and I built his hiding place there on purpose, so some part of him would always have the watch. The last line of the letter was a single short sentence, and Delia read it 4 times with her breath clouding the ink, and did not yet know she would one day read it out loud to a room full of people who had spent 90 years telling this story wrong. She did not go to town that day or the next. She photographed every page where it lay before she lifted a single one, then read 2 ledgers by lamplight with her supper going cold, and what was in them was not the work of a crank, it was competence, page after page of it. Water level, at dawn, at noon, at dusk. Rainfall in inches. Boats locked through, tolls collected, gates greased, weather and barometer, years of it, in a small firm hand, right up to the spring the entries change. The pages for March of 1936 were filled in the same steady hand as every page before. No panic in the letters, only the numbers climbing where numbers should not climb. 1st of March, feeder pool up 4 inches over normal, no rain. 9th of March, up 9 inches, reported to board, reported to district. 22nd of March, up 16 inches, dam face sweeping at the north abutment, reported. Then the 4th of April, and below the day's readings, in the evening line where 8 years of pages had logged supper and owls and the state of the moon, there were only 5 words. Dam gone at 11. Captain restless. Ranger slept until 9 the next morning, flat on his side in a bar of cold sun, off duty for the first time since the rains came, and Delia sat above him with a dead man's ledger open on her knees and no idea yet how hard a county was going to take being wrong. On Monday, she called the Holland Valley Historical Society and asked what they held on the Millbrook flood, and the archivist, a dry, precise man named Curtis Vole, went quiet a moment and then said, "Everyone here knows Millbrook." "Why?" Delia said the name Josiah Wren, and the line went quiet again, and Curtis said, carefully, that people in that valley still said the keeper slept when they meant a man asleep at his post. "Then you had better drive out," Delia said. "Wear boots." He came the next afternoon, crossed the footbridge announcing his poor opinion of its handrail, and stood over the ledgers on the cottage table for an hour without sitting down. His hands were steady on the ledgers and stopped being steady on the letter. "Do you understand what a copy to the water district means?" he said at last. "It means a record that never went through the board's office. If the received copy exists, this is not a story anymore, it is a correction, and corrections leave paper." 2 weeks and 4 telephone calls later, they were in the State Archive Annex in Columbus, winding through a reel of received district reports in a room that smelled of cold film, until the frame came up and neither of them said a word. Holland Water District, week ending the 7th of March, 1936, received and stamped. Rainfall, level, and in the remarks column, in a clerk's typed hand off the keeper's own report, feeder pool above Millbrook up 9 inches, dam weeping north abutment per keeper lock 4, J. Wren, 90 years in the dark, and it still agreed with him to the inch. There was one man in the valley who had to see it before it went any further, and Delia owed him nothing, and drove to him anyway. Warren Tolliver met her on his porch in Holland with a mug in his hand, and listened with a commissioner's patience, and when she said Millbrook and Wren, his face shut like a gate. "My grandfather sat on the canal board that closed that lock," he said. "I have read that file. I know what it says about the keeper." She did not argue. She laid the copies on his porch rail, the ledger page, the letter, the district print with its received stamp, and stood in the cold while he read, and watched 3 generations of certainty bend under 1 week of rainfall. "He put it in writing 4 weeks before the water district ever heard of it," Warren said at last, mostly to himself. "And he put it where they could not lose it." To his great credit, he reached for no excuse. Where did this come from? "Out of the wall by the spring, Mr. Tolliver," Delia said. "My dog found it." The Historical Society called its winter meeting for the last Friday in January at the Grange Hall, and word had gone around enough to fill the chairs and pack the back wall, feed store regulars, 2 men from the county, a reporter, Carroll in the second row, Boyd Kessler by the coat pegs pretending he had only come in out of the cold. Curtis laid it all out, the auction, the stone, the chamber, the district reel, Josiah's own glass plates thrown up on the wall, the feeder dam hole, the pool high against its face, the dark crack at the north abutment a week before it failed. Then Warren Tolliver stood up with a carbine in his hand, and the room went quiet as a church. "I have called the keeper of Lock 4 a careless man most of my life," he said. "My family sat on the board that closed him, and I have told his story as a lesson in taking a job seriously." He reported that dam failing 4 weeks before it broke, in writing to 2 offices, and one of them kept the paper. "The record was wrong, and the record was my family's, and I was wrong every time I repeated it, and I will not shade that with one more word." He sat down. Boyd Kessler did not quite stand, but his voice reached fine from the coat pegs. "I bid on that place for the foundation stone," he said. "Told this woman at the fairgrounds she'd bought a wet basement and a bridge to nowhere, and most of you heard me say worse than that at the store. Best $5,000 anybody in this county ever spent, and it galls me it wasn't mine, and I earned every bit of the galling. Dr. Raymond stood near the aisle with her arms folded. "I charged her $90 in November," she said, "to call that dog broken and order him off the water." That dog was not breaking down. That dog was on duty. My refund is written, and I would take it kindly if everyone forgot I used the word compulsive. Then Delia, who hated a microphone, read them the end of Josiah's letter with Ranger stretched across her boots, and gave the room the last line under the ink, the one sentence the wall had kept all this time. I was not wrong. I was early, and to a man who arrives late, early will always look like a lie. Nobody clapped for a moment, which was better than clapping. In March, the state was shamed into the thing that officers do last. It corrected the record. An addendum went into the Millbrook flood file with Josiah's carbons attached. The line about the alarmist keeper struck through. The warning credited to J. Wren, Lock 4, dated the 7th of March. The board engineer with the clean boots had died in 1970 with a scholarship in his name. The scholarship kept his name. The file stopped lying. Curtis traced Josiah to a rented room in Sandusky, 20 years reading gas meters after they took his lock. No wife, no children, gone in 1951, and Warren Tolliver drove up himself that spring and set flowers on a meter reader's plain stone. In May, the county fixed a bronze plate to the cottage wall beside the scored keystone. His name, his 30 years at the lock, and one line. He called it 4 weeks early. As for the crock, the auction card had read all contents, and Boyd himself offered to swear to it. A coin dealer in Columbus weighed out 4 gold half-eagles, a fistful of old silver dollars, and a small poke of gold that Josiah had panned Sundays out of the Canal feeder, and wrote a check for $19,000, and a collector took the glass plates and the survey linens for $4,000 more. It paid the back taxes, put a slate roof on the cottage, and ended the feed store shifts. The ledgers and carbons and plates went to the archive under Josiah's name. Donated, captain's collar stayed, oiled soft again, on a peg by the cottage door where the dawn light finds the worn brass. In June, the Water District signed an agreement it had not offered anyone in 50 years, a volunteer gauge station at Lock 4, and Delia keyed a radio to the same district she had reported to for 11 years. Holland Water District, Lock 4 gauge, in service. A pause, and then her old dispatcher came back, grinning through the static. Copy Lock 4. Good to have you back on the water. Emmett Pruitt rode out in July to see the plate and found Ranger on the bridge, chin on the keystone, his cloudy eyes on the slow bright water. Told you, he said. He never quit the post. He just took on a wetter one. Carol came out one Sunday with a foil pan of pot roast and stood on the footbridge a long time, looking at the bronze plate, the Canal going gold, her sister's name on a district agreement tacked above the cottage desk. I called this a bridge to nowhere, she said. I have been wrong about where nowhere is. That is the apology. Do not make me polish it. Delia did not make her polish it. Some doubters bring pot roast, and that is concession enough. If a deaf old dog holding his post through a month of flooded dawns put a knot in your throat, tell him so. Before you go, settle the one question this story cannot settle for itself. Some will say Ranger felt the cold, clean spring water breathing out of that wall at sunup, iron and stone and a shepherd's old collar coming up through the joint the 1 hour a day it quickened. Others will say a working dog knows an unfinished watch when he is standing on one, and that captain's post was handed down the line, dog to dog, the honest way. Water or duty? Tell me which one you believe in the comments. And come back for the next story, because the survey linens turned up a second sealed chamber at Lock 7. The county says that Lock goes to auction in the spring, and there is a coffee can on Delia's windowsill that has never once held coffee. Right where you are watching from tonight, while you are down there, this channel keeps its own logbook and reads every line. These mornings, the wall still breathes at first sun, and the light comes over the sycamores onto old stone and new slate, steam rising off a mug on the sill, and a deaf old shepherd lies easy on the footbridge above Lock 4, chin resting on the keystone that kept its promise.